All right, so we're going to look at the effects of industrialization on kind of American society. Basically, this is about how the industrialization that was occurring in the steel industry, the railroad industry, the oil industry, and other areas, how that impacted kind of American society, what effects it had on people. So one of the big effects is the kind of dehumanization of workers. At this time, most of the workers in America, they were kind of below the poverty line. For most Americans, they were making like $400 to $500 per year, and like $600 per year was kind of the amount that you would need to live a kind of comfortable life. So most Americans were below that. So like they weren't making a lot of money. Wages were low for the most part. Also, what was happening, one of the reasons the wages were low is because skilled workers were being replaced by machines, which meant that the majority of workers were unskilled or didn't require skills to have jobs. So that was also kind of like workers could be easily replaced, unlike skilled workers who had some training. In addition, there were some attempts to regulate laws. There were a few child labor laws. There were a few laws about government workers working 8 hours a day, that sort of thing. But for the most part, there was no real enforcement of any kind of labor laws. So the working conditions were poor, and there was really not a whole lot that workers could do about it. In addition, you have these economic panics or depressions that were occurring in 1873 and 1893, and these again contributes to the poverty of workers. So in this time period, all the industrialization that was occurring, it kind of made workers replaceable, like they were part of a machine, that they weren't actually human beings that had value and that sort of thing. So that was kind of one of the effects from the perspective of kind of the lower class and kind of the regular kind of average American. A second kind of category, second effect, was this idea that there was a belief that anyone could move up in society, that there was potential for social mobility. However, whether that was true or not, that's a different story. You did have these very popular books, the Horatio Alger novels, which often showed a rags to riches story. A young orphan boy would somehow able to become successful and move up the social ladder and become wealthy by the end. So this idea that it was like their own way of moving up on their own. And you have this speech given in which it talks about the idea of acres of diamonds beneath your feet. So it was a speech given by a preacher, kind of had religious overtones here, that people should look kind of to where they're at and create your own opportunities. He told stories about how a farmer found a diamond mine in his backyard, essentially, right? So that you can make your own opportunities, and you can become wealthy, you can become successful, and that it's your duty to try and become wealthy. So this idea of duty and what people are supposed to do is an important part of this time period. In addition, you have immigration, particularly from Southern and Eastern Europe, as opposed to previously, think about like the Irish are coming from Western Europe. Now we have Southern and Eastern Europe, so Italy, Greece, Russia, those kinds of places. And these immigrants are all coming for a better life, for economic opportunity. Many of these immigrants, their plans to work for a few years, save up some money, and then go back to their home country, to their families. So this is this belief that they could improve their lives by coming to America. And then there's this idea, the idea of the self-made man, which is kind of a myth, right? So the idea that the wealthiest industrialists, like the Rockefellers and J.P. Morgans and all these people, they started off at the bottom of society, and they just through hard work and intelligence, they were able to move up and become wealthy. But that really wasn't the case. Most of the wealthy people started with money. The one big exception is Andrew Carnegie, who actually was a relatively poor immigrant who was able to use his connections to increase his wealth and become one of the richest men in America. So he's kind of the exception that proves the rule, right? And this idea that the self-made man wasn't really a thing, only with very, very, very few exceptions. So it was kind of like winning the lottery. And one of the results here of this, one of the reasons that people are thinking about moving up in society is because there's this increased gap between the rich and the poor. You have these super wealthy people that live very ostentatiously. That means they have like lots of fancy clothes, fancy houses, fancy parties, all that sort of thing, these kind of conspicuous consumption. And then you have people that are making $400 to $500 a year. There's this huge gap between rich and poor. So the poor are looking up and thinking, how can they move up in society? So this idea, this belief that anyone could move up in society was an important one. Now, whether that was actually true or not, that's maybe less true than maybe people like to believe. All right, finally, we have the development of philosophies to kind of explain society or try and explain like why this industrialization was happening, what the effects were. So one of the big ones is social Darwinism. And it took the ideas of Charles Darwin of survival of the fittest and applied it to society. Basically, it said that if you were wealthy, it was proof that you were superior, that you were the fittest, you were going to survive, right? So this social Darwinism said that, it's kind of like the free market system, that government shouldn't regulate anything, they should just let things play out because the best people would naturally rise to the top. And that has some problems because, as I mentioned here, most people actually who had money started with money. So it's not really an accurate representation. There's also elements of racism in here, which we'll talk about at a different time. Another philosophy is a gospel of wealth. This is kind of a kinder, gentler social Darwinism. It still is saying that the wealthiest were superior, that they have, because they were the most responsible. But it says that because they were the most responsible, they had a duty to use their money to help people. So people like Andrew Carnegie would donate money for public libraries. They would fund universities. They would fund concert halls, that sort of thing. So they use their money as like a trustee for the people. Like they knew what to do with the money the best. Now, notice that a lot of these things I mentioned, like libraries and universities and concert halls and stuff, they were about education and culture. The wealthiest people who were using their money would never just give money to people. They would often use their money to create things like a library, which then people could go to get educated. So it put the burden of improving themselves on the people that they were donating to. They wouldn't directly help them with money. So here's some money to buy some food. It would be, here's some books so you can learn a trade so that you can become wealthy through your hard work. And then you also have people that kind of criticized these ideas, like Lester Frank Ward, who basically was saying that the government regulation was a useful way of fixing things, right? That the laissez-faire ideas of government not acting was bad, and that government could, since it was made by the people, they could actually use government efforts to improve people's lives by, worker safety laws or ending regulating monopolies or whatever it is, right? So this is essentially saying that government regulation was a useful tool to help the country. Okay, so all of these are kind of some of the effects, and some of them are positive, some are negative, but a lot of these deal with money and how the impact of people having money and the impact of people not having money. So I think that's kind of key idea of that split in society after during the time of the Gilded Age.